We have been told as kids to consume milk every single day, also as adults and as seniors, because milk is beneficial for us. We've heard this from governments, we've heard this from our parents. Well, what is the deal with milk? Is it good for us? Is it not good for us? What is the deal with it? Because by my research, I can see that milk production and milk consumption is the lowest it has been in the last 25 years. It has dropped dramatically. But why? Why has milk production and consumption dropped so much? What is the deal with milk? What are the benefits of milk? What are the disadvantages of milk? And what's the deal with all of these alternative milks out there, like coconut milk, almond milk, soy milk, macadamia milk, hazelnut milk, you name it? That's what I'm going to cover in today's episode. I want to talk about milk. I want to talk about the benefits, the disadvantages. Do you know why? Because I like to cover both sides of the story. I'm not going to diss milk and I'm not going to support milk. I'm going to look at both the sides of it. Is it good for us? Is it not good for us? And then you will be informed, you will be educated to make an educated decision on your consumption of milk. Let's get into it. It's Mondays with Mihaela. That's right, me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I absolutely love, and appreciate your support. For any of you who don't know me, I'm Mihaela. I'm a qualified naturopath and I'm absolutely passionate for all things health, business and overall success. And here on this podcast, on these episodes, I'm here to provide you simple, savvy and sustainable health hacks to optimize your health. And today's topic is going to be about milk. I've had so many people ask me to talk about milk. What are my views on milk and what should they consume milk? Should they not? Should they reduce it? Should they increase their milk consumption? Well, hopefully after today's video episode, you'll be able to make an informed decision for you and your family and your loved ones around you about milk. Well, to start off, we have to look at what is milk. Well, milk in itself can be in a dictionary can be found as the mammary secretion of milking animals obtained from one or more milking for consumption or as liquid milk or further processing. That's a definition of milk, but we all know what milk is. We have consumed milk. If we haven't consumed milk, well, most of us have consumed milk at one part of our life. We know as infants, we are made to have milk, breast milk, to survive in a sense. And then as we go throughout our life, we've been told to increase our milk consumption and have more milk. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know about who's listening here, but at some schools, they used to give milk at schools. It was a mandatory thing, not just water. It was milk consumption was mandatory at some schools. So we can see that the government has put in a lot of guidelines, a lot of policies and so forth in regards to milk production and milk consumption here in Australia, because it still is in our guidelines, which I'll talk about later. So for humans or animals to produce milk, we first need to be pregnant. We need to be pregnant and then we're able to produce milk, because that milk is key for the babies to survive, which is filled with nutrients, minerals and vitamins. So we only think that humans, well, first we can only think of humans as cows making milk, but there are so many other ones, and we actually take this milk or in forms of cheeses or so forth, which is sheep, goat, yak, water buffalo, horses, reindeers, camels. Yes, in Australia, I think it's in Northern Territory, they have camel milk. It's a huge thing because there's so many camels there. They even do camel burgers and so forth. But yeah, camel milk is a specialty there. So in 2011, it is estimated that 85% of milk production came from cows. So the other 15% came from those animals that I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately or fortunately enough, we're not selling human breast milk yet, and I say yet very lightly there. There are breast milk places that people exchange breast milk for individuals who are unable to express and so forth, but it's not available at our local supermarket. We can't go buy breast milk there. So that is good or bad, I'm not too sure. So to get milk from these cows, this 85% of milk production cows that we spoke about, these farmers, not all of them, some of them, the majority of them, tend to feed and manage their cattle in not the best ways. And what I mean by that is unnaturally. So they are feeding them unnaturally, they are milking them unnaturally, which is not the best way to go about it. So such as feeding them high levels of inappropriate protein to stimulate their rapid growth and milk production, so they're able to produce the milk that they need. Intensive housing, so cow right next to each other, not giving them room. Or the routine use of antibiotics and other drugs. This can all cause a lot of stress. So it's not only us who get stressed, it's animals also get stressed. I mean, if you have a cat or a dog or some type of pet, you know that your pets get stressed out. So these cows get stressed out also. So this is what most of them do. I'm not saying all of them, to get milk production out there. So this is something that we have to keep in mind when I do talk about these facts, and then I'm going to go about the advantages and disadvantages of milk. Keep this in mind of what the process is to getting milk also. So milk consumption worldwide can be summarized in this picture in 2018, just this one here or here. It's seen that India and the European Union and the US had the highest amount of milk consumption, and Australia came 11th on the list. So in regards to milk consumption in Australia, like I mentioned earlier, we have Australian dietary guidelines that were published in 2013 and are still in use today. I probably will do a video on these guidelines, but let's put that aside for now. So under these guidelines, it's recommended that females 18 to 50 had 2.5 serves of dairy per day. So one serve of dairy, which includes milk, is 250 milliliters of milk. That's a glass, right? So what they're saying here is to have 2.5 glasses of milk every day. That's 625 mils of milk every day. So these guidelines, not just milk, also talk about yogurt, cheese, and other dairy intake, but I'm talking about milk here. And as you can see, boys are told to have 3.5. Yeah, 3.5 serves, number of 3.5, who are between 12 and 18. It's a lot of serves. Even men plus 70 are told 3.5 serves, which is just a lot of milk or dairy consumption. But these are the guidelines that we're obeying by at the moment in Australia. So let's look at the benefits of milk in your diet today by following those Australian guidelines. What are the benefits of milk? Well, I would like to start off that milk actually contains 18 to 22 essential nutrients, including calcium, phosphorus, vitamin D, and especially important for our bones and skeletal system, the vitamin D there. So let's look at the benefits of milk consumption. What are the benefits of having milk in your daily life or in your diet overall? Because as we follow the Australian recommendations, we're supposed to have milk consumption or dairy consumption every single day. So to start off with, I would like to say that milk actually contains 18 to 22 essential nutrients, including vitamin D, calcium, phosphorus, just to name a few, and there's so many more out there. So it is very nutrient dense. Intestinal uptake of these nutrients is enhanced by the enzymatic capacity to digest lactose into D-glucose by mutation of the lactase gene, which most of us have, but it reduces as we age, but I'll get into that later. So I wanted to look into human breast milk first because yes, we can talk about milk on its own, but without talking about human breast milk and the start of life, I'm not giving enough information in this video. So in regards to human breast milk, the benefits are just absolutely crazy. They contain antibodies that help fight the baby off, help fight viruses, nutrients for babies, probiotics, cytokines for cell communication. They also contain important fatty acids for eyes, brain, nervous system development. The growth hormone, for growth factors, so the baby is able to grow, because in the first year of life they start off like this and then they end up like that. They become bigger, and not just in their body but also their organs, and also what the breast milk does is gives them hormones and white blood cells. So this is talking about breast milk. So there are numerous studies showing the benefits of breast milk on babies into adult life. So decreased risk of developing asthma, eczema, and food allergies later in life, enhanced performance, test on cognitive development, lower levels of infectious diseases, improved dental health, reduced risk of obesity later in life. And we know obesity is a huge factor, especially here in Australia. Decrease the rates of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So, breast milk gets me excited. And I know that sounds weird, but the benefits that breast milk has in it is just absolutely crazy. I mean, it's the new superfood. I mean, supplement places should be jumping on top of this in a sense when you look at it, because it is filled with super nutrients and superfoods that just feed the baby and allow it to grow and allow it to be fed the vital nutrients it needs. Yeah, so soon to be seen in your grocery aisles, human breast milk for cognitive performance. I'm only joking there. But look, we stop drinking breast milk by a certain age, depending on the child, and then we don't drink breast milk as adults. I don't recall drinking breast milk as an adult. Do you? I don't. So the majority of humans around the world lose the ability actually to digest lactose, which is the gene that we need. So we lose the ability because the gene is no longer functioning so as to be able to break down lactose, which is the sugar found in milk. So we reduce this by getting, as older we get, the less we get to digest lactose. This is because the gene for the enzyme lactose, which breaks down lactose, is switched off by late adolescence. Symptoms of this lactose intolerance include bloating, diarrhea, and so forth when individuals have milk. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, and that's why maybe some of you have cut out milk or drinking lactose-free milk now. But let's look at cow's milk. All right? So I found a research that looked at heart disease and the mortality linked with milk fat. Okay, so 2018 study looked into the link between dairy fat exposure, which is eating or drinking milk, and the mortality and cardiovascular links among older adults. The results was circulating. The result was that these certain acids that are found in milk were not necessarily associated with total mortality, which is death, right? Which means that this is saying that milk is not associated with total mortality, death, right? Which is good, right? So if we drink milk, doesn't mean we're going to die sooner. That's what this study is saying, which is a 2018 study. But let's have a look at more. When you look at studies, you need to look at not only the results, you need to look at the actual study, who was written by, who was funded by. So this study was actually funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I thought I'll do a bit of research on this, right? So what they did in 2008 is they gave $51.3 million to the East Africa Dairy Development Project. They also gave $2.5 million over 4 years to strengthen the dairy value chain in Bangladesh to increase the productivity of small-scale dairy farmers and link them to the dairy market. In 2012, they gave an $8.5 million grant further to the East Africa Dairy Development. In 2014, they gave $25.5 million to, again, the East Africa Dairy Development Program. So what I'm saying here is who is this study funded by? This study was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So to conclude this study, they got funding from individuals who are investing in dairy farmers or have interests in dairy farmers. So this is what we need to be mindful when we look at studies. Okay, so I wanted to look into another study that looked at the benefits of milk in regards to post-exercise recovery drink, which is a late study in 2019. So what they did is, to have a good post-recovery, we need to look at, one, the optimization of muscle protein turnover, the glycogen resynthesis, rehydration, and also the management of muscle soreness, appropriate management of energy balance. So since milk is a mixture of protein, carbohydrates, and micronutrients, particularly sodium, milk augments post-exercise muscle protein synthesis and rehydration. It can contribute to post-exercise glycogen resynthesis and also post-exercise muscle soreness, right? So it ticks all the boxes in regards to a post-exercise recovery drink. This is saying that milk can be a good post-recovery drink, right? So who wrote this? The authors, I'd like to also put in, they have previously received funding from the dairy industry for their research. And they've also given presentations previously for the dairy industry. So that is saying that. So let's think about that also. So there's two studies there that give the benefits of milk, but they both have been funded from the dairy industry. Okay, so that's up to you to make a decision in regards to that. I'm here to provide you the information and you can link it all together. So now let's look at the negative effects of milk on your health. Let's first look at bone health. We've all been told to drink milk for your bone health. Well, a 2014 study to examine whether high milk consumption is associated with mortality and fractures in women looked at two large Swedish cohorts, one with 61,000 women and the other one with 45,000 men. A lot of people. High milk intake was associated with higher mortality in one cohort of women and the other cohort of men, and with higher fracture of incident in women. And let's look at the competing interests in these studies. All authors have completed a uniform disclosure form there, and no support was given from any association for this study. Interesting, right? So another study in 1997, they looked at whether high intake of milk and other calcium-rich foods during adult years can reduce the risk of fractures. The conclusion was that this data did not support the hypothesis that higher milk consumption and other food sources high in calcium protect against hip or forearm fractures. Okay, so actually women who drank more than 2 glasses of milk per day had a relative risk of these fractures, right? So this is what I'm saying, like, you got to look at the studies, see what they're saying and move on from them and get the information and make an educated decision. So what I also want to put in there is there's a lot of study that's actually been done in regards to fractures, that weight-bearing exercises helps with fractures, and so does vitamin D, sunlight. Okay, so these are the key things that help with fractures. But also another one thing that has stopped or has increased the risk of fractures is people are more indoors, they're moving less, they're seeing less sunlight, and they're moving less. So that's another thing that we have to take in consideration. So let's look at a 2019 study that looked at autism. So the opioid peptides released during the addition of dairy proteins such as casein, which is found in milk, were suggested to contribute to autism development due to the announcement of opioid excess hypothesis of autism. So this paper considered the role of peptides as a potential factor in determining the pathogenesis of autism in aspects of this activity. So, which looked at, so it also looked at the effectiveness of elimination diet, casein-free diets in the treatment of children with neurological disorders. So this was a recent study that came out and spoke about autism in children, and they found out that individuals who went on a casein-free diet were a lot more better in regards to the autism spectrum than individuals who were taking in casein. And that also goes into line for 2002 study, which was a single-blinded study to evaluate the effect of gluten and casein-free diets for children with autism. And they concluded that so they were done before and after for a period of 1 year. So the development of the group of children on diet was significantly better than the controls. So individuals who went gluten and casein-free, kids who had autism, they had a lot better results than individuals who were intaking casein and gluten. Another one, which is bit of a hot topic, cancer, is they looked at, this study looked at the dietary intake of 53,000 women who initially were free from cancer and were followed for 8 years. Consuming as little as a quarter to a third cup of dairy per day was associated with an increased risk of breast cancer of 30%. But drinking 1 cup per day, the associated risk went up by 50%, and those drinking 2 to 3 cups increased the risk of 70 to 80%. So this is absolutely mind-blowing. This is the link between cancer and milk. Crazy, absolutely crazy. So by the end of the study, there was about 1,000 new breast cancer cases during the follow-up. So there was no clear association that was found between soy products and breast cancer independent of dairy. But when compared to low or no milk consumption, higher intakes of dairy calories and dairy milk were associated with a greater risk of breast cancer independent of soy intake. That is huge. That's huge numbers in regards to dairy intake and cancer, in particular breast cancer with this one. Another one to wrap it up, I want to talk about telomere lengths. So let's look at a 2019 study that talks about telomeres. So to summarize telomeres, what we can think about, a simple analogy for telomeres function is like the caps that protect the end of your shoelaces. So your shoelaces would go wild if they didn't have those caps, and that's what telomeres are on our DNA. So what they found out in this study, where they looked at 5,800 US adults, they looked at a strong association between milk fat intake and telomere length. So with the sample delimited to milk drinkers only, milk fat intake was linear inversely related to telomere length. So this is huge. So this is looking at the cellular longevity is often indexed objectively by measuring the length of the telomeres. So the longer your telomeres, the healthier you are. So short telomeres tend to have more oxidative. If you have a shorter telomeres, you are more likely to have higher oxidative stress linked to chronic disease such as heart disease, depression, obesity, cancer, and essentially even death. So shortening your life. So this study shows that there's a link with milk consumption and shortening the telomere length in adults. But so now that I've given you a bit of the benefits of milk and then the not so benefits, the disadvantages of milk, let's have a look at our environment. I thought I'd put this in there because our environment is key. We need to look after our environment. With all of these things happening, bushfires, flooding, cyclones and so forth, we need to look at our environment. Well, the consumption of cow's milk poses numerous threats to natural environment compared to plant milks. Cow milk requires the most land and water. As you can see here with this graph, you can see how much is needed for dairy milk, rice milk, soy milk, oat milk, and almond milk. You can see the emissions, the land use, and the water use that's required for them. So in general, it requires more resources and causes higher emissions than plant-based alternatives. So this study proposes that we move away from animal products to reduce environmental damage, right? So this is just something that I wanted to put in there because I love the environment and we should love the environment. Mother Nature is absolutely amazing. It does so much for us. We're able to breathe because of it. So we need to look after it. And if in any sense we can look after it, why not? So to put a conclusion in together, we can look at, when it comes to milk, we can look at so many studies and there's so many mixed cases. Just to give you an example, in 2018 study, milk intake was associated with lower risk and hip fractures, whereas a 2018 study, same year, milk consumption was linked to an increased risk of hip fractures. So one's saying one increases, one decreases hip fractures. Further, a meta-analysis study included 6 studies focusing on women and 3 men concluded that milk intake and hip fractures are unrelated. So another study saying they're not related at all. A meta-analysis of 19 studies concentrating on colorectal cancer determined that milk intake reduces risk, whereas an evaluation of 32 investigations, the same researcher concluded that milk consumption increases the risk of prostate cancer. Similarly, some research indicates that dairy milk intake reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes, whereas other studies show that dairy consumption is linked to an increase of insulin resistance. Several investigations have concluded that dairy intake is unrelated to type 2 diabetes and associated with metabolic function. A Japanese study also looked at milk intake was inversely associated with all-cause mortality, but a Swedish study looked at and found that milk consumption was related to increased all-cause mortality. I can understand why you're confused, because just by reading all that, I'm confused too. Is milk good? Is it not? So many research studies saying it's good, it's not, it's this and that. And that's why sometimes we can't always rely on the research. We need to look more into it. It's such a confusing space. Is milk good for us? Is it not? I can conclude by saying, from a more physiological and a molecular nutritional perspective, milk is a postnatal endocrine signaling system. Milk consumption encourages mTOR-mediated anabolism and growth and suppresses autophagy. So what does that mean? What this means is milk consumption increases our growth and stops our cells from cell death. Okay, cell death is key for longevity, because if a cell is sick, it needs to die. So what does this do? What does milk do? It encourages building up anabolism, not catabolism. Catabolism is breaking down. So increases anabolism, us building up, right? And growth, and suppresses breakdown. It suppresses cell death. So this is what milk does. And when you think about it, this is key in babies. Babies need anabolism. They need growth, and they don't need as much autophagy as we do. They still need some, of course, essential. However, they don't need it as much as adults or even older adults. So what I'm saying here is that breast milk is key for babies and their development. It is absolutely key. However, is milk good for adults? Is anabolism, growth, and suppression of autophagy, is that good for adults? And taking also into account that our genes actually doesn't allow us to break down lactose after a certain age. After having that breast milk, it says we don't need this anymore. Let's stop functioning. We need more energy spent on other things such as autophagy and so forth. Now think about it. That is my view. And also further, let's help the environment. If we can opt in to help out the environment and ensure that we have the environment there for us later on in life, for generations after us, why wouldn't we? And when we saw that graph, we see how much cow milk, how much emission, how much water, and so forth, and what damage it does to the environment compared to other alternative milks. So that is a wrap up of my view on the benefits, advantages, disadvantages on milk, and it is up to you to make an informed decision if you should have milk or if you shouldn't have milk. I do not drink milk. I do not consume dairy products at all. And that is because I understand the biochemistry. I understand what it does to our body. I understand the risks that it can have on my health. I understand the link to disease that milk has. I understand the suppression of autophagy, the increase of mTOR. I understand all that. So this is why I am not consuming milk or dairy products in that sense. And I know that the Australian guidelines tell us to have us as females or even males to have 2-3 servings of dairy a day, but now it is your choice to make that decision as an adult, and I'm here to provide you with that information. So what I want to do is, do you have any other questions in regards to milk? Pop them down here in the comments. I love and appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Do what you do best. Love, like, share. Until next Monday, love you.